city folks, what's something rural folks will never understand? Story 1, how far away close things can be. My sister-in-law lives in a very rural area, and she came to visit us in the city and was looking up stuff on Facebook Marketplace. She got all excited and was like, hey, this thing is only 8 miles away. Had to explain to her that 8 miles involved about a 3-hour round trip on 2 traffic-choked bridges. Story 2, you're going to see some weird, and you're just going to have to let it be. There are a lot of things that will make you stop and stare, raise your eyebrows, make you really uncomfortable or scared even, but it's best to just let it be and move on. Of course, keep your wits about you around the weird. Unless there's an imminent danger to your life or someone else's, it's best to just ignore the weird things you'll see in the city. Example here in Portland, Oregon, I was walking to my car around midnight on a Tuesday last year, down the street from my car. I could hear hooves on the pavement and music. I looked up and saw a man on horseback, wearing a motorcycle helmet, and playing disco out of a boombox he had strapped to saddle. He was pacing his horse around in the middle of the street. I just got in my car and decided whatever was happening there didn't concern me, and I just drove home. Story 3, traffic. Doesn't matter if you have a fancy car that can go 100 miles per hour in half a second. Every single road forces you drive slower than people walk due to constant congestion. Story 4, how to properly use any type of walkway. I near trampled a family of 4 last time I was in O'Hare after they just suddenly stopped walking to talk to each other in the middle of the airport. Story 5 are more regulation friendly, because when your neighbor lives on top of you, you don't really want them to have all that much freedom. If you live in a rural area and your neighbor wants to go hunting on his own property, no big deal. If you live in an apartment complex and a guy owns a gun, it might go off while he's cleaning it and punch a hole in your wall. Rural and urban people seem to get in political tiffs because they can't imagine that their rules might for the other set. Story 6, I had a buddy who moved to the city from a town of under 800. He told me it took him a few months to figure out why city cars didn't ding when you open the door, because in a town of 800 you never have to take your keys out of the ignition. Story 7, if you find a good parking spot, don't share the location with others. I work in downtown, and I know several empty areas where you can just park your car for free. I shared one location with a coworker, and now it's unusable because it's always full. Never again will I share my secrets. Story 8, locking your doors, whether that be a car or a home. Living in a rural area for college, I noticed people, especially those who lived all their lives in that town or another equally as small, would rarely lock their doors and would leave valuables in their cars, etc. If you leave something valuable in your car in the city, don't expect it to be there when you get back, nor expect all your windows to be intact. Story 9, service staff in your favorite chain restaurant have no idea who you are or what your order is because they were just hired and have to handle hundreds of customers a day anyway. Story 10, as a city person, specifically Sydney, Australia, who moved to a rural area 2 years ago, people don't understand that even though there's a ton to do in the city, that doesn't mean you can actually do any of it when you live there. Traffic is so, unless you live right on a public transport line, traveling from one part of the city to another part of the city takes forever and is a hassle. So if your friend lives 15 kilometers away, you may as well live on different planets. In the country, 15 kilometers away might as well be the same town. Also, everything is crowded, and there's no parking, so if you live in the suburbs, you might almost never bother doing anything tourists would want to do, because 20,000 other people want to go to the same place you want to go on the same day. I also find that rural folks, at least where I am, don't tend to like any food they're not familiar with. I don't think they'll ever really understand that to a city person, Thai food and Indian food and Italian food are normal food. When country people go out, they tend to want the same sort of food they can get at home. City people are the opposite. City people tend to want something when they go out that they can't do at home. Story 11, having lived both rurally and then in the city, I think the biggest thing country people don't realize is how, despite there being, in many cases, millions of people in close proximity to you, a person can easily fade away and no one will know their business. Country areas are chronic for people knowing they're also combined with a toxic rumor mill. A country town, many people will know you either directly or as Mr. Dirtman's son, and even though I haven't lived in that town for well over 10 years now, many people, when I'm back there, will still talk to me like I never left. In a city, unless you actually frequent a business or specific people, no one knows you or gives about you, your life, or any gossip involving you. Story 12, cultural diversity, is actually great. I can have Colombian food for breakfast, Cuban food for lunch, and Korean food for dinner. Not just that, but music from all cultures. It teaches you to see the world from a bigger perspective other than the U.S. Parallel parking is actually a lot easier than Reddit makes it seem. Sometimes even when you're really lonely and depressed, you can go to a busy store intersection, etc., and feel less lonely because you're surrounded by so many noises, people, smells. Story 13, that it's not rude or weird to ignore strangers on the sidewalk. That it's not antisocial to not talk to each other on the sidewalk or even smile. Rural folks often spend all their time outside of their own private property, either in a car or in a private business. Walk out the door, get in the car, drive to the store, go in the store. When you see people in a private business, that's like the only time you're going to see a stranger all day. So talking to that person seems normal, but in a city, more people walk, take transit, etc., and even in the course of just going to work, you'll be within earshot of literally thousands of other people. It is far from a novel thing. In the country, when you're driving somewhere, you don't roll down your window and talk to someone at a red light unless you know them. You'd probably think it'd be weird if someone tried to do that to you without explaining why they're doing it. Like a stranger rolls down the window and says, "Hey man, how are you doing?" You'd be like, "Good. How about you?" But probably be pretty confused. Well, in the city, since people are walking around as a means of transportation, stopping someone on the street to talk to them is seen socially as the same thing. It's like they're asking you to roll down your window. It only makes sense if there's a specific reason. Otherwise, it's weird. Story 14, how easy errands become. Within 100 yards of me in any direction, there's my office, my gym, my barber, my bank, my dry cleaner tailor, a post office, a UPS store, grocery store, pharmacy, movie theater, and multiple bodegas, food shops, bars. It's amazing. Story 15, that even though we may appear cold, we are still decent human beings with the same manners as rural people. That means no pushing and shoving because you're in the big city, okay? Story 16, that being a decent human being means more than being decent to your kin and the folks you grew up with. It means being decent to strangers, many of whom are very, very different from you. Story 17, environmental regulation, is very important. Just because that doesn't affect you or your neighbors directly, and at this moment, doesn't mean environmental hazards aren't problems. Story 18, everything you need is usually within walking distance or easily accessible through public transportation. Also in larger cities, there are multiple options for schooling, impersonally from the city, and could have applied to any of the hundreds of high schools within NYC. Meanwhile, in some rural areas, there's only one option. Story 19, I sit next to Muslims every day on public transit. They're not scary, dangerous people. They're my neighbors. And they're honestly the least likely people to be rude, smelly, or take up more than one seat. Story 20, that spending billions of dollars on an infrastructure project may sound expensive, but when it's divided amongst the millions of people, it's not that bad. I live in a city that contains over a quarter of the population of my country. Whenever the government announces a new piece of infrastructure, many people in the rest of the country go ballistic that somehow their money is going to our infrastructure, and never mind that we pay our taxes as well. Story 21, as someone who grew up in cottage and dairy farm country and now lives in the fourth largest city in North America, I can shed some light on the biggest culture shocks and what country misconceptions of the city are like. People in a country fear the city. They believe crime is rampant and that murders are like a daily thing. They do not understand how public transit can possibly be more efficient than just driving, because country buses are 1 hour apart and parking is bountiful. Buses that run every 10 minutes, a subway that runs every 5, and 20 parking are all insane. They will never understand the concept of trying new restaurants. In the city, if you could afford to, you could get takeout from a new restaurant every meal of every day for decades and never even have to fall back on a chain restaurant. In the country, by the end of the first week, you're at McDonald's because you already tried every restaurant in town, even the one restaurant that claims to be Chinese food. The impressiveness of city parks. A lot of country folk would be shocked to hear about the canoeing, sailing, fly fishing, watching, hiking, and even bush parties that are every bit as common in the city as they are in the country. They think the city is the city and the country is the country, and never the two shall meet. But major cities have large parks where city folk get up to very country folk-like activities. The diversity, I went to high school of just over 1,000 students. There were 2 black students, 2 First Nation students, 1 East Asian student, and everyone else was white. Nearly everyone else was some mix of Scottish, Irish, English, and French. Even Italians, Germans, etc. were in the minority in the city. There's so much diversity and so many different languages and foods and fashions. I've been here years now, and I still every now and then look around on the bus and just think, what a wonderful place to live. How amazing is this? I've talked to people from Israel who have expressed that back home they felt like they risked their life every time they took the bus. And here it's so easy. Back in my hometown, the sight of a woman in a burqa would be shocking. Here it's like, oh cool, that drag queen just gave up their spot for the woman in the burqa. That was sweet of them. I love the city. I love the country too, though, but not a lot of the people there. But the suburbs can get bent. Diversity isn't always scary. Story 22, you just can't give every single homeless person you see money. I grew up in a small town where there were no homeless people, at least none that ever panhandled near busy intersections. After moving to the city, I was so shocked the first time I saw one, my myopic little bubble got popped. A friend that was with me that grew up in that small town gave him 5. 10 minutes go by, and we pass another homeless person. She gives him a couple dollar bills. A few minutes later, there's another one. It's never ending, and even now, after living in the city for over 5 years, I still get super uncomfortable when I pass a homeless person with a sign and ignore them. Edit a word. Story 23, at least in NYC, don't preface a question with "Can I ask you a question?" Example, excuse me, does this train go to Jamaica Center? No, this is Manhattan bound. You want to go upstairs and cross over to the other track. Versus, can I ask you a question? No, or sorry. Story 24, busking. Go to the Santa Monica Promenade, and you will find all sorts of random entertainment, stunt performers, dance troupes, and of course the musicians. Story 25, parking downtown is going to take a while. It's just something you have to accept, just like you have to accept walking to your mailbox or shoveling your driveway if you live in the country. Story 26, why anyone would want guns and other weapons to be regulated so heavily. When you're not more than 10 feet away from your nearest neighbor with paper-thin walls, I'd rather not have some Rambo wannabe with a 12-gauge blasting holes in my ceiling or floor just because he got into an argument. When you live in an actual city like NYC where 9 million people are crammed into a 5-mile radius, things don't go from 0, 100, but from 99 to 100, it's best not to have every armchair warrior locked and loaded to the gills. Sure, the occasional idiot with a gun goes a bit nutty, but there's something like 50,000 cops who are better prepared to deal with them than the average Captain America is, and the murder rate reflects that. America really is two completely separate countries. The urban and rural have very little in common with each other as far as needs. Someone living in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Texas, needs to have guns, as your nearest exit ramp is like 50 miles away, and the 2 sheriffs on duty in that town might be 45 minutes away if they even hear you need help. In major metropolitan places, though, there is simply not enough room, too many crazies, and too much stress to realistically handle the proliferation of guns. And realistically, there are 20 people who just call the cops because your TV was too loud, never mind someone just blasting people with a gun. That gets dealt with fast. You really need a combination of crazy levels of cops and downright un-American levels of gun control in a situation like NYC. But for some reason, people think it's a good idea to arm every crazy in the city, because sometimes they run into coyotes when they drive the quarter mile to their mailbox. Same goes for everyone saying we need to ban guns everywhere. I've been out to buttfuck, Texas, and let me tell you, those need guns. There's wild animals and crazy out there, and not a cop to be seen for days unless you're going 80 on Route 10. Then they're behind every cactus and billboard waiting to give you a ticket. Story 27, the income inequality in America. That pollution is a problem, that schools are underfunded in bad parts of the city, that it is expensive to be poor, that Republicans are not helping society. Story 28, that you actually get used to the noise. Had a friend visit, and he asked me, how do you stand that? I had to pause to realize he was talking about all the dogs barking. You get used to city noise. Story 29, for every story about people in a city behaving like animalsaholes, there are 2 stories of genuine compassion. Except in Camden, New Jersey. Everyone sucks there. Story 30, even when you own property, own your own house, you cannot escape the din of humanity. I got a place in Chicago here, and I can still hear both trains, the freeway, the HVAC on top of the brewery next door, a flood of delivery trucks coming and going for them, the garbage truck, drivers shortcutting down my street, ambulances, fire trucks, and police. Contrast that to when I lived way up north in WI for a short time. All I heard was whispering pines. Story 31, you can get pretty much anything you want anytime you want it. 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and you want Chinese food delivered to your doorstep. Don't even have to call anyone. Don't even have to pick up your wallet. Just a few phone taps and boom. I just moved to a city where everything closes at 10 p.m. and going through withdrawals. Story 32, on the train in rush hour, no one talks or really interacts. So when you hop on and comment on everything, it's very entertaining. Nice though for a change, I guess. We take it all for granted. Story 33, I grew up out in the country, now in the city, and family come visit. 2 things they seem incapable of understanding. One is standing on the left side of the escalator so people can walk past, as opposed to just parking your fat self right in the middle and being completely oblivious to the line forming behind you. Second is the amount of incidental walking you have to do. You can't just drive everywhere and park the car right out the front. Go to a game. You have to walk from the bus terminal to the stadium and back. One go to a story attraction in the middle of the CBD. You're walking there from the train station and back, going to IKEA. That's walking around the whole place twice, etc. Story 34. I might take only 20 minutes less time on my commute than you. I know you're traveling 5 times the distance. But city traffic can oftentimes be a nightmare, especially with a horrendous public transport system looking at you, Dublin. Story 35. That their conservative laws and votes make our lives considerably harder, causing and contributing to unemployment, child abuse, neglect, and homelessness, just to make their lives slightly more convenient and religion easier to follow. Story 36. That there's a lot going on in terms of underlying cooperation within a big city that merits the need for a baseline of regulation and governance, even though it may potentially mean giving up some freedoms or rights. Every day, every morning, you're trusting that tens of thousands of people are doing their job correctly just so you aren't killed. I'm not talking about people killing you. I'm talking about walking down the street and trusting the scaffolding, taking public transit, and trusting the people who maintain the tunnels. It's an incredible effort of cooperation that we take for granted. Rural folks depend on the roads, the guy who built their house, their car manufacturer, and maybe a dozen other factors. 11,000th of the trust required to live an urban lifestyle. Dare I say that rural folks have the privilege of demanding complete individual freedom, so they can live the life they want, because they don't rely so heavily on the rest of the cooperative around them to succeed, nonetheless survive. Story 37. Don't talk to me on the tube subway. Unless you're an attractive woman who wants to ask me out, or I know, unlike you, don't talk to me. It's not even 8 a.m. yet. I've only had 1 cup of coffee. I've been up since 615, and your chit-chat. I'm reading, I'm listening to music podcasts, and not here to meet friends. Rural folks seem to just talk to everyone they meet, and it's weird. Story 38. That walking is just like driving. It's fine to stop if everyone is waiting for a light, but for sakes, do not stop walking on a busy sidewalk. If you need a moment to get your bearing or check your phone, move off to the side. Story 39. That for teenagers, the concept and prospect of being poor is very real, which is why we take school and entering college very seriously. If you make 40K in the big cities, you're practically poor anyways, so the drive and push to do very well in school is real. I have in-laws who live in rural Arkansas, and my wife's younger half-siblings honestly did not take college seriously and said she would do equally fine in life if she went to beauty school rather than college. She's now poor, broke, doing retail, and essentially locked her future into remaining a small-town girl. Story 40. I'm a city kid with country relatives. Diversity is not their strong suit. Most of the I hear them say about people of different races, religion, or preference is just patently false. They're not willfully trying to be racist or bigoted. They just live in an area where they know everyone in a 200-mile radius, and it's just good OL boys as far as the eye can see. I am embarrassed for them sometimes. They don't know any better. Story 41. That not all urban neighborhoods look like Manhattan. In most cities, that's just downtown. I live in an older, mid-sized city, and most of our housing stock is actually single-family homes with small yards. My neighborhood is mostly old mansions divided into apartments. Our state's constitution forbids the annexation of adjacent towns. So, actually, I'm talking about the real, original city and not a newer suburb that got absorbed by the city. Story 42. You'll definitely want to street view your destination before you set out so you know what the building looks like, what parking is like, and if it's on a one-way or near a shitty part of town. To people in the city, guns are 99% of the time seen and used as violent weapons. They're not tools for people who have lived their lives in the city. Some could be convinced otherwise, but it's a hard sell. There's lots of people, none of them give about you, and if you randomly nod, smile, or talk to someone, you'll be seen as a threat of some type, maybe trying to con them out of some money, maybe about to mug them. Either way, people get skittish. City folks live, work, and talk to people of different races, religions, and nationalities on a daily basis. You might not want to admit it, but they do know better than you do on the topic. Rural folks have a better view and knowledge of guns. Cities have a better view and knowledge of people typically. Cities tend to be more inclusive because they realize that, for the most part, people are people and one person isn't inherently worse by default. Because of it, sure, racism exists in cities, but not at the levels it exists in towns that are 95-1 race distance. When I live in rural areas, 12 miles was about a 15-minute drive. In the city, 2 miles is a 20-minute drive. Story 43. Living with people who are different from you broadens your horizons and appreciation for other cultures. You don't get raped and mugged every night by minorities. They're just people. Story 44. How desensitized your weirdo meter gets. The daily game of Bluetooth or crazy. Some guy walking around the grocery store in a Barbie doll pink bathrobe and army boots. An actual fist fight at the bus stop. None of this is more than a raised eyebrow. Story 45, the fact that although we're more likely to live in a place that might be on the receiving end of a terrorist attack, most of us are less scared of immigrants in general BC. We interact with a larger swath of them every day. Generally, they're hardworking and chill. And for all of the so-called crime and things rural folks are more scared of, most of us would never, ever, ever, ever want to trade places and live more rurally. No offense, and TBH, no terrorist foreign. Anyways, gives two shits about attacking your tiny town in the middle of nowhere. Who are y'all so afraid of? Story 46, cars broken. Take the bus, car's out of gas. Take the bus. Well, fell off car. Take the bus, going downtown. Take the bus, you know what, just take the bus. Story 47, we're not rude, just because we don't take a lot of time to chat. There's 8 million people here all trying to move around and get stuff done. If we all took time to stop and talk to one another, city would grind to a halt. That's all. If we have the time, we just might chat, need directions, well, help. Don't take it personally if we don't, however. Story 48, for the love of God. Please stay to the right when on sidewalks and escalators. And remember that in a big city, there's always someone behind you when you randomly stop to pick your nose in the middle of a crowded sidewalk. Story 49, how to walk down a street in a sketchy areas. These are places with few open businesses and some people hanging out, but not in an aggressive manner. For that scenario, Google sprinting. But if you're just in a place that has poor people in it hanging out and talking, just slow your pace. Keep your eyes, and more importantly, your face open, and say hello to the people you come across. Not in an overly friendly way like you know them, because you don't. More relaxed way. Be friendly, be yourself, and be aware. If someone asks you a question, engage them in conversation, and be willing to be honest. If you have to be somewhere soon, let them know early on, but don't be rude about it. Just mention it. I'm headed to an appointment, but I have a moment. Smile, brother. You are about to learn something. Story 50, stand on the right of the escalators in the tube. And make sure your suitcase is either behind you or in front of you, not blocking the left-hand side where faster people want to walk. The tube should hire people whose whole job is to break the legs of people who stood on the left. Story 51, I grew up rural. Lived in 2 different countries and 5 different states. Spent time in at least 8 other countries. Lived both rural and suburban, and worked and visited cities often. I am a firm believer that both city and rural life have advantages and disadvantages. If it were up to me, I would be living on a farm ranch or up in the mountains somewhere, but I have a legitimate career, which I cannot do it from those places. Reading the comments on this post, I see a lot of misunderstanding of people from rural areas, and it's kind of sad. Not everyone from the country is backwoods, racist, inbred, or stupid ignorant. Of course it exists, but I have found examples of shitty people everywhere I have ever been. I also find it interesting that this question has so many replies versus the other, probably because the rural folks are off busting their asses on the farm. Story 52, if I want to go somewhere else. It's less than an hour to the airport by public transportation. If I want to go to any other major metro, DC, NYC, Chicago, LA, ECT, it will cost me a pittance if my local Amazon warehouse has it. It can be to my door in less than 2 hours. I can have any ethnicity of food delivered to my door in an hour. I can have a car summoned to my door in 5 minutes to go anywhere in the city, and there are enough good-paying jobs here for me to be able to do these things. Even at my scrub gas station job, I can afford to do these at least once a month. I will never return to the rural I left, where buses stopped running at 6 and didn't even have Sunday service at all, where we had a handful of takeout options, where Applebee's was the fancy restaurant in town, and everyone bought everything at Walmart. That wearing a MAGA hat around DC is basically a bullseye on your head that screams to local street hustlers, beggars and muggers, and some country rube tourist who will fall for anything. Come take my money. Nobody from DC would be caught dead in one of those things. There's one guy in DC who doesn't hate Donald Trump, and that's Donald Trump. DC is chock full of people telling you BS stories or trying to intimidate you into giving the money. Every big city has these people, but they're particularly prevalent in DC because of all the tourists, their prey of choice. It's easy enough to pick out a tourist just by their clothes, gait, and weight. Don't make it easier. Even if you think Trump is our rightful God Emperor, leave the MAGA hat at the hotel. It's just asking for trouble, especially if you leave the National Mall area and head downtown. DC is way safer than it used to be, but violent crimes still occur, even in nice parts of the city. There are plenty of urban youths here who would gladly beat the out of a Trump supporter just for the fun of it. Do not engage with anyone who approaches you. Don't make eye contact. Don't respond to what they say, even to say no. All their stories are bullshit. They're all trying to scam you or worse. I can't tell you how many times I've walked by one and heard some dumb story about needing cash to get to his dying parent or sick child or job interview or whatever, and thought who the believes that. Then on my way back, you'll see the same dude talking to some friendly Midwestern-looking lady who's saying, "Sorry, I don't have more. I hope you get there. God bless." And be like, "Oh, that's who?" Story 53, how outnumbered they are. In my experience, rural small town folks seem to think that urban America is an aberration and they are real America. It's very much opposite. 85 of Americans live in metro areas of at least 100,000. Half of Americans live in metros of at least 6 million. We're an urban country. Story 54, why I feel safer surrounded by people than alone. In the city, if something happens, people are around. Some of them will stop and help if necessary. They will call an ambulance if you were attacked. There are people around who saw what happened. Also, without alcohol, very few people are going to attack others with lots of people around. When I'm alone on a street and see a single person walking towards me, part of me is thinking I'm going to get stabbed. I was walking somewhere with my mom, and she wanted to walk down the almost deserted street that was a longer walk than going through the heavily populated one, because she felt safer that way. Completely blew my mind. To me, busy streets with lots of pedestrians equals safety. Story 55, living in the city really isn't that scary. I'm in Cleveland, and like my friends think I live in some scary cesspool of degenerates and lowlifes, but really it's just a bunch of depressed Browns fans, sad. Not scary, like I had a girl I know yelled at me over the fact I go to Target at night by myself. Like, girl, I'm fine. Story 56, the concept of how far away a place is should be measured in time, not distance. There are plenty of places where, due to a confluence of negative factors, are only about 15 miles away, but it requires 3 hours to get there since it's pretty much required to use public transportation due to traffic, tolls, lack of parking, etc. And that can take forever, as opposed to if you could somehow just drive 60 miles per hour nonstop to get there. Story 57, I moved to a 40,000 population town for work. To some of these people, this is the big city. I've heard people complain about traffic or parking here. Story 58, how close stuff is. I used to live in a 200 souls village and had to walk, didn't have a car for 30 to 40 minutes up a stretch of road with nothing but trees around it to get to a grocery store, another 20 minutes for a bank, and my favorite nurse shop. Now I moved to the fourth biggest city in my state, Bundesland in Germany, and when I didn't have my internet connection set up, I logged into the free WLAN of my bank. Right next door, now I have my bank literally 10 meters from my home. My nurse shop 55 I counted, and a grocery store 500 meters, but that one sucks. I drive to 1 kilometer away. Takes 5 minutes. Also the traffic, there was none in the village I lived in or any of the surrounding villages. Now, I avoid certain roads during the day, which I luckily can do easily, because when I have to use them, they're pretty much deserted because I work different times than the average Joe. The only thing I despise is parking. I park one cigarette length 4 to 5 minutes away from my home because all other parking spaces are either timed or cost, and the one I'm actually using is the parking lot of an old, abandoned grocery store. Story 59, cities change fast, businesses come go, people come go, buildings get torn down, new buildings get built, neighborhoods change character radically, sometimes in only a couple of years. Story 60, I can travel around the world in an hour here. Little burbs with pearls of cultural exploration. I've lived in Toronto for 4 years, but I'm still wide-eyed at a lot of the little things. I can feel like I'm in trendy South Korean plaza at 1100, then have shisha in an Afghan joint half an hour later, passing a million of different shops and nooks on the way. I grew up in the country in a community that was basically farmers. Huge contrast. Story 61, stop taking your sweet time going down the only road in a town. People got TO do and people TOC. The concept of planning your entire day in the morning and packing your bag so you have everything you might need: computer, water bottle, gym clothes, hand sanitizer, that book you were trying to sell back, and a few reusable, hard-to-rip bags for your last stop at the grocery store. Story 62, some of my family live in rural Mississippi, and several of the older ones don't understand things like working at night or being up late at night. They go to bed not long after dark, and they don't understand the concept that if you work a night job, you're at work at night, and on your days off, you're generally asleep during the day and up at night, because that's your normal schedule, sort of related to that, going out after work, even when it's not late. They go to work, come home, eat dinner, maybe watch a TV show, then go to bed, eating out at a restaurant. For some of them, it's something they do a couple of times a year for special occasions, but otherwise almost all meals are eaten at home, going out with your friends. Almost all of their activities are family related, and if they do something with friends, they usually come to their house. Not being married and having a family, most of my family on that side gets married young and has lots of kids. Granted, I'm now almost 50 and I never got married, but when I was in my very early 20s, some of them used to ask me all the time why I wasn't married and didn't understand that not everybody gets married and starts a family at 19 or 20, not needing to stock up on food or supplies beyond normal amounts. In the town where they live, There's literally nothing open after about 9 at night, and the grocery store is only open until 6 or 7, and it's not open on Sunday, and the next closest city is 25 miles away. I live 2 blocks from a 24-hour grocery store. If I happen to run out of something, I can replace it any time. All that said, it's not all my relatives, as I said, just the older ones. Story 63, we don't always have to drive. Really, I live in the heart of a city, and I can Uber, bus, Lyft, walk, taxi, metro, airplane if NEC, and Amtrak. There's so many options besides driving that I love to choose instead. Walking for me is my favorite. I love walking around my city or walking to Georgetown. It just feels so nice. Story 64, the convenience of having 11 movie theaters to choose from. Oh, the new Star Wars is out. Which theater do you want to go to? The one with the new reclining leather seats, the one that serves craft beer, the one that has waitresses deliver full meals during the movie. Okay, let me go ahead and pick out our seats online. You go ahead and roll up a joint.